Hello and welcome to Hardware Intel webinar series, the webinar from UAP exploring how hardware can help shape our futures. From residential to commercial, we'll be discussing today a range of fire-related topics. Today's webinar, we're going to be talking about using fire door and hardware testing processes. So my name is Nicola John, and I'm a business consultant, and having worked in construction and the door industry for many years, fire doors, testing, quality products is very important to me. So joining me today is Julian Roberts, the Product Certification Manager at UAP, and also Richard Morris, who is the National New Business Development Manager. So welcome both to episode 2 of the Hardware Intel webinar. Thank you for agreeing to chat to us today about fire testing. I wonder first if, Julian, you could give us a short introduction maybe on your working history, especially in relation to the testing of products.
Good afternoon. Hello all. My name is Julian Roberts and I'm the Product Certification Manager for UAP. It's a very wide and varied role, including the development and testing of new products, audit testing and the certification of existing products, along with liaison development and testing for external clients. Prior to that, I was the Quality Manager for Fullex Testing Services, a UCAS accredited test lab conducting weather, durability and security testing for windows and doors. And before that, I spent a number of years within the aluminium window and door industry.
Thank you, Julian. I mean, it's a really big and varied career. What about you, Richard? How does your background and testing sort of merge together?
Yes, well, my title actually is National New Business Development Manager. I've been with UAP now for 7.5 years at the moment, and I've seen my role change from being coming in as a sales role initially in a very small kind of area of just South Wales, developing and growing my area over the period of the last 7.5 years. And I see my role now as being more of offering support in regards to some of the bigger key account customers that are looking to get into the fire door market, or indeed actually in the market and needing more support with our product range. I can then link across with Julian and also my other colleagues to ensure that what we offer is up to standard, fit for purpose, and obviously being able to pass the very more stringent tests that are out there these days.
Yeah, and in episode 1, I chatted to Paul Goggins, our specifications director, about specs and what clients require. So today I'm interested in us taking maybe it back a couple of stages and having a look at the testing of fire products. So maybe, Julian, you can kick us off really about those stages and what happens when you're testing new products in the fire market.
Well, perhaps firstly we could deal with actually getting and obtaining our brief. We need to establish the project goals, what the success metrics are, the stakeholders and their roles. Yeah. Very importantly, perhaps the budget, the milestones along the way to actually achieve that end goal, the timeline, the schedule, and then we need to establish our project communication plan.
Right, that's quite it's quite intense, isn't it? There's quite a lot of steps there. How long does it take you normally to get a product out to market?
That's a very open-ended question. That can be a few months to several years, perhaps even a patented product. That could take 5 years even to obtain a patent for something of that nature. Yeah,
of course. Richard, you have lots of experience of helping clients with full fire door tests. What about an insight into testing from the client's perspective?
Yes, similar to what, as Julian mentioned, it's from the beginning of the brief as such. When I get involved, when we know a client is looking to do a fire test, it's finding out, establishing a few key criteria. You know, obviously what type of door they're trying to manufacture, what kind of result they're trying to look for in regards to FD30 or FD60 testing. If they're then looking to have the PAS 24 element, which is the latest standards for security testing on the door set as well. That's the initial stage, and then we look at the individual products, our key product range that we can offer, and basically, yes, again, budget as well is another key factor. You know, it's crucial these days that you balance the cost of the product and the door set cost to actually have form and function.
Yeah, of course. So what about differences in testing, either of you, in the different materials, you know, composite and timber and PVC? What sort of different, are there any differences?
That's the huge difference. Yeah, something that would perhaps work in a timber door and that's worked for many years, perhaps you would find you try and bolt that into a composite door and it would have no success whatsoever. That would be completely different. So you would need to change your perspective and liaison with the various suppliers, customers, to change that completely.
Yeah. And what about your clients, Richard? Do you see people producing fire doors of different materials, or do they tend to stick with one particular and become more of an expert in that area?
Yes, I would say that since obviously the Grenville tragedy, we've seen a big push, well, first of all, in making sure that the quality of the actual fire doors are much more robust. The testing that's been done on fire doors are now have to be dual orientation, which means both directions, to make sure that at the end of the day the door set is fit for purpose. We had issues then obviously after the Grenville situation where composite fire doors were kind of seen as being a product that had a lot more percentage chance of failure. Since then, and since a lot more development has been done by the slab manufacturers themselves, we have seen a big improvement in the composite door setup, more looking towards a timber core setup, which then obviously means that you have a timber core with some kind of panel on the outside of that surface, or a veneered panel on the outside of the surface, and then you have your standard timber doors. And there's a market for both options. You have internal fire doors and external fire doors, so you need to take weathering into consideration. And yes, most manufacturers do focus on one product type, not two.
Right. Julian, from UAP's perspective, with your products and things, what sort of tests do you do independently first? Is that are they indicative, or do we do, you know, what do you do before it gets to the client and goes into their door set?
So really, a lot of tests would be done on an indicative basis. We would do development testing internally and in liaison with other people to make sure that the product was fit for purpose before it went out there. Before you even start to approach a fire test, you may actually need to liaise with existing suppliers of intumescence or something like that. You might need a bespoke product to be designed, manufactured and trialled before you would even think about releasing that to the marketplace. But obviously, depending on what the customer's trying to achieve, perhaps you would need an entire gamut of testing, perhaps from conception through to finish. So we could be involved in the recommendation, preparation of all aspects of that project from beginning all the way through to the end.
And I'm guessing that it's the regulations that you know, look at how and what you do, and you're governed by those. So fire regulations have changed quite a lot over the last couple of years. So tell me about how has that affected your testing process, Julian?
Well, the testing process has obviously evolved over time because products obviously perhaps need to be re-engineered or they'll be left behind.
Yeah.
Post perhaps Grenfell tragedy, products used on most fire doors now, as Richard mentioned previously, will have a dual certification for fire and security, which is an additional challenge for products that perhaps originally just had that single role and now have to perform in more manners than that. The ever-evolving test methods are a challenge. Perhaps we now have EN 1634, the European standard, that's sort of overtaken BS 476 in most cases. Well, perhaps while the temperatures in the furnace on the curve would be the similar. However, the pressure levels within that furnace are different. So perhaps BS 476 was seen as a slightly easier test to achieve desired results. But now with 1634, you also, if the door's not symmetrical, then you need to do dual-sided testing. So you've got confidence that it'll perform wherever the fire might start. And you've also got the aspects of all external fire-rated doors now having to be CE or CA marked under 16034 and 14351. And that obviously is now compulsory for doors that are external fire-rated doors. And perhaps as a result of that, BS 476 can't any longer be used to mark an external fire door.
I mean, from your perspective, Richard, I'm sure it's great for your clients to have Julian and that knowledge to be able to use that, expertise when they're buying your products. How have your clients been affected with new regulation changes, do you think?
Yes, and I wouldn't just say our clients, I would say all the members of staff actually within our business there. We go to Julian as the font of knowledge as such in regards to standards and support, really. So yeah, we work together quite closely in regards to new work with new customers and existing, because they're up against the same problems. I think that everybody is these days, where we see with the Brexit situation, do they go down the BS route? Do they go down the EN route? And as Julian mentioned, the standards needed for EN are seen as higher, and therefore the kinds of lower London Borough Councils these days are looking for the best option available on the market to ensure that they give the best ability and best security and best fire resistance for their clients and end users. Yeah.
So in that case, what sorts of challenges do you come across when you're testing these fire products? What are the issues? What are the things that happen that other people don't see?
Right. Well, with the testing itself, we can test obviously in the UK. Getting hold of a test facility is quite hard these days. You could be looking at 6 to 12 months looking ahead in regards to just getting test slots in a furnace situation. Obviously, a UCAS accredited test house is what you'd have to use. It's then getting the doors set up to ensure that they're done to the correct standards, and every single item on that door slab or that door set is itemized, and everything is detailed, and technical information is kept on that door set to ensure that replication of that product is done every time in a factory environment, so that when we do a fire test or FD30 or FD60 test, that door set can be repeated and repeated and repeated in a factory environment, even down to the same size screw, the length, the diameter of a screw, and every other product on that door set has to be the same product that was tested.
I mean, from your perspective, Julian, I'm sure you'll come across some challenges as well.
Well, one obvious challenge to start with is the many and varied substrates into which the products need to be installed.
Yeah.
When a product might be suitable for one, the material or a size constraints would prevent the application of that into another one. Different products obviously react and perform very differently under test. A product designed for a timber door is very likely to prove unsuitable for use in a composite door. Perhaps another example would be with a timber door, you may be able to utilize a lock that just is secured on the latch, whereas a composite door may require an auto throw lock to actually prevent that from actually deflecting more when it's in a test furnace. Perhaps another couple of examples, maybe a letter plate, something as simple as that, might require different or additional insulation due to the substrate into which it's being fitted. Perhaps different gaps around doors to allow the smooth operation of that door set, or different methods of installation might require different or innovative products to satisfy those differing requirements. And then the one that perhaps is causing perhaps more people a headache is perhaps the dual role regarding fire and security. So that's an additional factor to consider. And as usual with all testing, something unexpected always arises that no one ever envisioned, and that just creates new challenges, all of its very own, really.
I think that's part of the issue, isn't it? That no two tests are ever going to be the same. Even the same product performs differently, sometimes, in two different tests, which brings us on maybe to the third-party accreditation, which I feel very strongly about, which has been a big change in the last couple of years. And really what your thoughts, both of you, but maybe Julian, you could start, what your thoughts on third-party accreditation for manufacturer and installation, which, by the way, is taking its time to catch up, isn't it? But on third-party for manufacturer, do you welcome that?
Well, perhaps let's consider if you didn't have such accreditation, some of the questions perhaps to ask are, how do you establish compliance? Or how do you check that it's actually built in line with the test evidence? Does that product actually reflect what the original test was? So perhaps without the use of the scheme, there could be issues with ongoing maintenance and difficulties for the end user with their risk assessments. Actually, one of the actual recommendations in the Hackett report actually said that we needed a more effective testing regime with clearer labelling and product traceability, including a periodic review process of test methods and a range of standards in
Yes.
order, and this is probably where people will be aware, to drive continuous improvement, higher performance, and to encourage innovative product and system design under better quality control. Apologies, I had to read some of that.
Yeah, it's okay.
Perhaps third-party certification is useful because it provides, it's useful improving performance, adding assurance that that door set is capable of the task it's intended for, and the schemes promote confidence that the product, as well as the processes, meet that specified criteria. They add value to that, really.
Yeah.
It's a degree of trust provided by that assurance.
It is, and that independent person, hopefully an expert, is coming in to look at your processes, your procedures, look at your product, check that things are always being done in the same way, should give the manufacturer, as well as the client and the end user, that peace of mind that everything is being done as it should be done, isn't it? Even if you've got a swap over of staff, it might be over a period of time. So it's really good that is being, done, I think, rigorously and across the board now. Are you finding all your clients taking it up, Richard?
Yeah, so I think what's happening is, obviously, again, we mentioned the word Grenville, and I think that is a watershed moment really in the industry, not just in the fire door industry, but every element of a fire assessment, what's needed these days in regards to it could be a block of flats, or it could be a high-rise block of flats. It's any kind of building that needs fire regulations attached to it, or safety attached to it, fire safety. So it's not just about creating a good fire door. It's also then making sure that the actual end user has confidence in that door, so they feel safe. Then obviously, if you have a housing authority or housing association looking after the properties, they do their annual maintenance checks, which again is part of the accreditation. And it's the whole package, I think, now is seen as being vital. And therefore, the actual part then that's played by the actual manufacturer of that door set, again, has their role to play. And they feel a part of the right team then by having their part played, and their part played correctly by having consistency in a product via the third-party accreditation scheme. And then it means that your councils and your housing associations will then look at in favour of those kind of customers that have got that accreditation in place. So it's going to be needed across the board for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing with the third-party accreditation schemes for installers, because there's ones for installers and there's ones for maintaining your door afterwards, they all sort of have that common thread, don't they, where people are doing something correctly and being checked and monitored, because a fire door is not a fire door if it's not installed correctly. So it could be manufactured in a fantastic manner, the same, each time to the test requirements. But if it's not installed properly in the right fixings and as you say about substrates as well, Julian, earlier on, if all of those things are not right, then it could be deemed not to be a fire door or not accurate or correct. So those schemes are out there to help all along the chain.
Yeah.
So we touched earlier on, which is a really emotive subject, about testing slots, and it was very difficult, I know, in the last couple of years to get a testing slot, but more specifically to get the report afterwards. Has that improved? Has it improved for UAP? Has it improved for their clients? From a UAP perspective, Julian, have we seen any improvements?
No, there's obviously finite testing capacity, specifically in the UK and probably Europe-wide perhaps. And with that increased demand post-Grenfell and companies carrying out dual orientation tests that perhaps they hadn't previously, for their dual scope tests, also testing for their CE and CA marking, that demand has been extraordinarily high, and those lead times are still lengthy. That situation is ongoing with a similar situation, despite perhaps some new testing facilities actually coming online in the UK. Perhaps if we deal with test reports, that's always a bone of contention between clients and test laboratories. Sometimes it's just down to the pure volume of work that a small number of qualified staff are actually trying to complete. That situation is sometimes exacerbated by not actually having the relative information, the relevant information. It's not available, or perhaps it's in insufficient detail. The person actually providing that, their role may mean that they are struggling to actually complete that in time for it, or it can be a lack of communication, or perhaps a lack of understanding of what's needed or required. it always leads to frustration because the end user needs that report and it's not available by the date. I know what it's like with test reports. I've seen it from both sides of not being able to get hold of one, but also not being given the information to actually make one in the first place.
Well, and what, from your client's perspective, Richard, I'm assuming it's the same thread, is it?
Yes, it is. And I think the other factors that have played a part in the last 18 months in the last 2 years is obviously the COVID situation has meant that whilst the capacity in the UK is maxed and we can do testing in the UK, obviously traveling abroad, in Europe and further afield, it has been more difficult for our customers to get over there and be part of that test or even get the door sets out there for testing. Capacity in Europe does seem a little bit better. And also the ability to get the return on the test information and obviously the documentation back it seems to be a little bit quicker in Europe. But as Julian says, it's everyone seems up against it from the manufacturer of a product to have that tested to the end user, which is the door set manufacturer.
That's a real shame, really, because I've been out of it for a few years and I was hoping that situation might have improved a little bit. But, bit of a shame. So future, that's obviously going to be an improvement for the future. But how do you see the future? So with regards to products, fire testing, any changes on the horizon, do you think? Anything that we could obviously improve the testing facilities and the reporting and that sort of area. But maybe, Richard, if you want to kick off what you think the future could hold.
Right. Well, I think obviously from a UAP personal perspective, obviously we have a raft of new products that are just coming through at the moment. One of our key points that we try to work at is having a certifier product scheme that we follow. So with a certified product, you can add that product directly into a door slab that's made of a timber construction. Obviously, key different methods of using that depends on the door slab. But it's our goal basically to improve the fire door market, not just with our own products on it, but to see that the quality of a product going out consistently improving, the testing being done on it, and then the backside of that, then making sure that it's being well maintained and well looked after. So we have got innovations, we've got new products coming through. So I think within the next 6 months to a year, we'll catch up on the fire test results that we're still waiting on, Julian, isn't it? We'll have those results and then we can keep moving forward on the other products that we're working on too.
Yeah, it's always exciting to have new products to come out into the market, so it's really good to hear that you've got some new fire innovative products that will come out. Yeah. Julian, what about the next sort of 5 years in testing and product development and all the things that you look after, which is vast, I know.
If we deal with a sort of marketplace, and in the report, Dame Judith Hackett said it was clear a culture change was needed in building safety. So you can actually raise the bar. So it could become possible that third-party certification scheme does become mandatory, and then perhaps upskilling across the entire industry will be needed. We've also got the Fire Safety Act 2021 making significant changes, clarifying that Fire Safety Order 2005 does actually apply to the structure, the walls, the entrance doors in buildings with 2 or more properties, domestic premises in them. So that sort of puts what the government said in advice notes, puts that sort of onto a legislative footing. I can't say that.
Yeah.
And then perhaps people who are responsible for these buildings, they'll have to carry out a fire assessment and maintain a fire management plan. So there'll have to be a suitable maintenance regime. And that would include the fire doors. And perhaps because of that, greater focus will come upon the components, the end products, the inspection, the installation, the maintenance, as well as greater security of any fire test data that people have.
Well, there's lots still to do in the market, I think, isn't there? We've come a long way, but there's lots still to do. So it'll be really interesting to follow UAP's journey over the next few years and see how you raise that bar out in the marketplace, really. Thank you both very much for chatting to me today about fire doors and testing and testing products. That's all for today's episode of Hardware Intel. Thanks to everybody who's been listening. We'll be back with webinar 3. That'll be Richard and myself, and we'll be talking about fire door hardware for global urbanisation and looking at UAP's products and hardware in general with regards to global urbanisation. So if you haven't seen episode 1, that's where Paul Goggins and I discussed specifications. Please check out the UAP YouTube channel. And don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.